Hello and welcome to the Eerie Nerd Podcast, the podcast where I talk about all things geek. In this episode, I am joined by my partner Jess as we discuss the events of the most discussed TV episode in recent days. Episode 3 of HBO's The Last of Us. The episode is called A Long, Long Time and stars Nick Offerman from Parks and Recreation playing Bill and Murray Bartlett from The White Lotus playing Frank. In this episode, we see a very touching story between Bill and Frank, but join us as we discuss in detail our thoughts on the episode. Enjoy. Hi Jess, welcome to the Eerie Nerd Podcast.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm alright.
Lovely. So we're here to discuss episode 3 of HBO's The Last of Us. So far, what are you thinking of the show?
I am a massive fan. I absolutely love it. I love the games. Although I didn't necessarily play them, I watched you play them from start to finish, particularly Last of Us 2. So I know the storyline, and so far the show is not disappointing in the slightest.
Yeah, I would definitely have to agree. I'm absolutely loving it. It's one of my favourite TV shows on TV at the moment, and it's one that I'm really eager to carry on watching and really see where they go with it. I think the last 2 episodes, they've knocked it out of the park, so it's really, really exciting to see where they're going with it. What do you think the show does that's unique, that makes it different from shows like, you know, The Walking Dead and Black Summer and that sort of thing, the typical kind of zombie TV shows?
I think obviously there are things that are similar in anything that's kind of what you might call post-apocalyptic. But I think the reason it stands out to me is the storyline, and it's also the really strong characters that are in it as well. But it's also the way they've made it look and feel, I think, is really unique. It's really detailed, it's really, really thought out, and I think in other shows that are very good in lots of other ways, I think they lack that kind of real character development and that attention to detail that The Last of Us just seems to do so well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with you there, but I think from a gamer's perspective, and a lot of our listeners will probably agree with us on this point, is that it has to be one of the best video game adaptations I've ever seen. Not only are they doing scene for scene almost, you know, of certain moments that is ripped from the game, they're also adding in scenes which flesh out what happened in the game. So, in my opinion, from the whole bit with Tess in episode 2, a lot of people complained about it, that it wasn't the same as the game. But as I said to you when we watched it, you can't have it the same as the game, because straight away afterwards you're in a shootout. That would just be boring for people to watch. And for people who've never played the game before, they're not going to understand why all of a sudden are they shooting soldiers, sort of thing, you know? So when they add that sort of aspect to it, absolutely love it. But look, we're here to talk about episode 3, which is called A Long, Long Time. And this focuses on one of the characters, which was kind of, personally for me, a character which was not one that I really gelled with and that I didn't particularly like in the game. And I think a lot of people probably felt that way. But this focuses on this story and his story, and that's the story of Bill and Frank. Now, what did you think about the episode? Not really playing the game, not really knowing those characters. What did you think of it?
I think it's actually an incredibly important episode for a lot of different reasons. I think he is actually similar to Bill in the game. He does still have that part of Bill, but it's fleshed out a lot more, obviously, and it goes into a lot more detail and obviously changes the outcome of what happens in the game. I think it's an important episode because it shows immensely intelligent and emotional storytelling, both from the writers and the actors. Getting to know those characters so quickly and having such an emotional connection with them is incredibly important. I also think it is actually now a really important part of the rest of the storyline as well. In the sense of how that interacts with Joel going into the rest of the storyline. And in that aspect, I don't know what you think, but it definitely was a really important episode in so many shapes and forms.
Absolutely, no, I totally agree with you. I think being able to flesh out Bill's character to one that, like I said before, you didn't really know, and really kind of bringing life to him and seeing him in a total different way. We're going to touch on why we think that later on. So you mentioned the acting there, and obviously we want to touch on the actors. That's Nick Offerman and Murray Bartlett. Obviously, they are fantastic actors anyway. Nick Offerman, obviously, I know from Parks and Recreation. I've never seen Murray Bartlett in anything before, so that was a new actor to me. But certainly, the character that Nick Offerman plays in Parks and Recreation is this manly, I'm a man, I do everything, I'm a strong American man, I can do whatever I want sort of thing. And you get that impression with Bill at the very start of the episode. When he's kind of in the house and he looks up and he hears the federal agents in his house and he's like, "Not today, motherfuckers," whatever it is he says. And you get that impression that he's a strong American man. I love guns. I love America and all this kind of stuff. But then that changes throughout the episode.
And I think what's important is, as well, the initial impression you have of him is probably, a prepper, a survivalist, probably more, this is just an impression, probably more on the right wing of politics, a bit of a conspiracy theorist. And yet, even before Frank comes into it, you get a little bit of a taste that there's a lot more to Bill than that. He likes fine wine and food and music, and I think that's really important. At that point, it's already giving you a glimmer of, don't just judge this book by its cover.
But also, I agree with you, but also what you mentioned there about him being like a prepper and things, there's a line in it which makes me think that he's actually more of a recluse in his normal life before even the apocalypse happened. And that's when he says, "This isn't a free lunch at Arby's." And that's when Frank says, "Arby's never did free lunches, it's a restaurant." And it's that sort of thing of, did Bill ever go to restaurants? Or did he just literally live on his own, not go out anywhere, stayed at home because he didn't want to face people? Was he very much of an introvert in that sense? Then Frank comes along and changes that and lets him know, actually, there was a world before this sort of thing.
Well, actually, I kind of go a bit... I agree with you in part on that, but I think actually for Bill, the kind of post-infected world, this new world, is actually initially for him, it's freeing. It's free from societal norms. It's free from worrying about controlling governments, although obviously there's still federal and things, but in the sense of what it was like in the old world. And I think initially for Bill, it's incredibly freeing to him. And I think that's probably something that actually, to start off with, he's probably more happier after the apocalypse than he was beforehand. But as we know, as we meet Frank, it's not just about being prepared and surviving, and it becomes a story about more than survival.
100%.
And it becomes more about an aspect of humanity that is, we are no longer just about survival of the fittest. We need love and companionship and someone to share the world with, even in this post-apocalyptic world. And just very quickly, I think the two of them, what I think's lovely is, in the old world, Frank and Bill probably would have never met, would have never been in the same type of circles, might have not even ever given each other the time of day. Yet in this world, which is now so brutal, it's a moment for two people to come together who may have never had the opportunity to come together in a world that we might have considered less brutal beforehand.
100%. And I think I know the answer to what the question is I'm going to ask now, and I can probably give the answer myself, but I want to hear it from you. Other shows have touched on the subject of love in an apocalypse, i.e. The Walking Dead, which is the main one, but they've not done it in a way that this show in one episode has managed to do. Walking Dead, you had the story of Maggie and Glenn, which was an ongoing love affair, love story. Then you had the love between Rick and Michonne, but there's not been an episode in The Walking Dead anyway that has such an impact as this one. And possibly it's because it's a different subject matter than what The Walking Dead had ever covered, but it has to be something to do with the writing as well. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of things, actually. I think the fact it's two middle-aged, hairy men falling in love is wonderful. It's not something we see on our screens very often. And
they're men that aren't six-packed and chiseled and beautiful
just
looking.
middle-aged men. And also, I think that, to me, makes the story of their love story even more emotional and connecting, because it is so blatantly shines a light on love is love. That's all it is. If you fall in love with someone, you fall in love with someone, and gender and the way someone looks or anything like that ultimately is not at the forefront of your mind if you get a connection with someone as instant as Bill and Frank's connection. And I think that makes the storyline as well. I think the way the writers created their lives in 30-40 minutes ultimately, because we had, in the rest of the episode we did have kind of Joel and Ellie as well. It's like, I think, as probably a lot of people have said, it's like Up. It's like the beginning of Up.
100%.
It's this wonderful way of telling the story of two people's lives in a short amount of time, but actually their lives covering many years, feeling that emotional roller coaster with them. And I think that's rare. I think that doesn't happen very often. And I think it takes a skill as a writer and as actors and editors and directors to be able to portray that love story in really such a beautiful way. It was done with sensitivity and beauty and thoughtfulness and all those things that by the time you got to the end, even though the ending made me cry, and I know made you cry, and a lot of people cry, and a lot of people hurt, cry until they hurt. It was still a beautiful ending as well.
I think also the reason it made people cry is, I think it also made people think about how they would react if their loved one was in that situation. I think that's part of it. But like you say, I think it's also to do with the fact it is just pure, unadulterated love. And it's just love in its purest form. I think that is what makes people so happy. And I think also for me, I said this to you when we were discussing it afterwards, it's this whole thing of Bill being this strong, independent, I'm a man, I'm a strong man, I'm probably a manly man. But when they share their first kiss, beforehand you suddenly see him turn into this nervous little boy, and he's cowering into himself, and he's really unsure if it's just a total contrast to what the character of Bill you've known from the first 10 minutes of the show. You've kind of gone, whoa, that's he's nervous. Like this man actually gets nervous, and clearly this Frank gentleman is someone that he should really be with. Like, you know what I mean? It's someone they're sharing something, and I think that's really important. I think what the writers have done is just blown it out of the water, and I don't think any show will be able to create that feeling that everybody's felt for these two characters.
I think that links into the fact that obviously Bill couldn't be his true self in the old world,
100%.
which probably is what kind of also a lot of people can associate with as well. I think that's good that you were saying you saw the more vulnerable side to him, which was lovely. But on the same side, as you kind of went through the years, in the next scene they're having a fight, it still was Bill. It still was him. He was still his prepper. He was still himself. So they complemented each other. They needed each other, and they perfectly complemented each other as well.
But that's what was quite nice about the contrast between the episode and the game, is that we discovered afterwards that you can actually go back in the game and pick up Frank's suicide note and read it for yourself, because if you don't do that, you don't really understand what's in the note. And it says at the end of the note, "I'd rather kill myself than have to spend the end of the world with you," or something along those lines. I may be kind of, freeballing it there. I'm not 100% sure the actual words, but when they're having the argument in that episode, you can kind of see where Frank is coming from, because he's angry with him. But then you just see straight away, actually, no, even though they're angry with each other, you can still see that love there when they look at each other. And then you go to the scene of where Bill goes out to protect the property, and then he leaves Frank inside and doesn't tell Frank about it. When the raiders come, he goes out, he goes to protect, and he does it without telling Frank. In a way, is that what Bill has always done? Just gone out to face them and said, "I'm going to take them on." But now he has something he needs to worry about.
Well, I think that's the key thing a lot of people have said, that I've watched people who've reacted to the episode say, is they don't think Bill's character would have just ran out with a gun and started shooting raiders without protection. He probably would have had a sniper rifle from an upstairs bedroom window or something. But I actually think, yeah, probably if Bill was by himself, he would never have run out there just shooting. He would have done it in a clever way, in a safer way.
Because he knows not to do that.
Because he has something to lose, which is that lovely line of, "Before I met you, I won't have it right, but he now has something to fear, because he's worried about losing Frank." Him running out kind of recklessly to shoot the raiders is because he has something to lose, and he doesn't want that to happen. So he doesn't maybe do it in the way he might have done if he had been there by himself, which was probably a little bit more cleverer, shooting from a bedroom window, whatever it was. I think that showed that he needed to protect it even more than what he felt like before as well.
I think what we need to talk about, obviously, Tess and Joel coming to see them, because we can't talk about this lovely relationship that Bill and Frank have got without highlighting the relationship that Joel and Tess had or didn't have. Because in the game, it's never confirmed that Joel and Tess had a romantic relationship. It was just assumed that they had a romantic relationship, whether or not they were partners, whether or not they were just sleeping together out of convenience, or whether or not there was an actual love there. But in the episode, it seemed to show that they were this partnership.
I think they were together. It just was never like an official thing. It was never "I love you, you love me, let's look after each other." It was kind of an unspoken thing between them. And I think seeing Frank and Bill together may have shown Joel that you can have that love, the open love for someone again, even though that makes you fearful of losing them. Because I think this kind of links into how important this is into Joel's storyline, which is Joel has been, since the beginning of the apocalypse, or whatever the infection you want to call it, love has hurt him, so because of loss, and his daughter, and probably many other people he's come across around him, Tess, obviously he's fallen out with his brother, and actually love to him is a dangerous thing in this world, because when you love someone you might lose them, and that's heartbreaking. And actually that's why it was so important what Bill said to Frank about, "You have now made me afraid. You've given me purpose, but I wasn't afraid before." Because to have that love means you have the chance that you're going to lose that person. And I think, which is why it's so important, this episode, and when Joel and Ellie eventually get to Bill's and obviously find the note, it's really important to Joel to understand that yep, love hurts, and it could hurt even more and keep hurting you in this new infected world, but you still need it. And it's not just about survival. You need the love and companionship to get through it. And I think that is kind of a turning point in Joel's mind of, yeah, he can't do that with Tess, but he has the option to now help Ellie through this life. And I think it's the beginning of their relationship between each other. And Bill's letter is so pivotal in that moment.
Yeah, I think also Bill's letter is pivotal in that moment also because it's such a contrast to what Frank's letter was in the game. And we've read a lot of hateful, disgusting comments about this episode. And that is just from people who are small-minded, bigoted, horrible people who need to just crawl back under the rocks that they've come from. When you can't just see that this episode is just about pure love.
I think it's actually what Last of Us is about, even in the games.
100%. And Neil Druckmann has said that in the past.
It's about love and loss. And if you can't see that, even playing the games, you're missing the point. And I feel sorry that you can't see that. It's not actually about survival. It's about more than survival. And I think this probably episode makes that even clearer, that you have someone like Bill who could have probably survived for years and years and years and years and years absolutely fine by himself, and probably like Joel could have survived years and years and years in this world by himself. We need more than that.
But what I think, just talking about Last of Us as a whole, and it's something that we discussed in 2020 quite strongly when the second game came out, and it seems to be happening again here. The Last of Us has been able to, certainly Last of Us 2 and this episode, has been able to bring out what is almost like the true feeling of a lot of people. So the gaming community went against Naughty Dog and Last of Us 2 when it came out because of Ellie and Dina's relationship, and also Abby's...
Without giving spoilers for people who haven't seen The Last of Us.
If you haven't seen The Last of Us 2 at this point, it's 3
but there
years
might
later.
be people who...
If you haven't seen it, yeah. But you know what I'm saying. Like, it's pretty obvious that you would have seen it all around anyway. But then this episode, obviously with Frank and Bill, it's just brought the same...
But I have
bigotry out again, and it's almost like Naughty Dog have gone, we're going to do this. Don't give a crap what you guys say about it, because you guys are wrong and we're right because this is right.
Yes, but I think you also have to remember that the people who the kind of homophobes, the bigots, the people who are ignorant, they're in a very small minority.
Oh, absolutely,
it might seem sometimes like they're shouting the loudest, quite often because they like to. Actually, I think what's a positive thing to go by is that the majority of people who watched this episode and also played The Last of Us 2 saw it for exactly what it was, which was about love and loss and so much more than just very simplistic things. And I think, unfortunately, as a woman, and like I said, I do think it's still a minority, but I do think in the gaming community there is a lot of homophobia and there's a lot of misogyny as well. And I think it's really important that we have games that are pushing the boundaries on those things and showing players that there are other ways to portray certain characters. And I think that's really important. But again, I just go back to, we have to remember this is the minority of people who just like to scream the loudest. And actually, we should probably all feel sorry for them, because if they can't see love for what it is, they probably have never experienced love like that in their own lives. And that's just a sad thing to think that to them, that is more of an important thing to feel anger at something like that than to see it for what it is. And that's just a shame, actually.
It might sound that we're having a bit of a rant at at this point with all this, but it's an episode that has brought this subject matter to light, and it's something that obviously, as Jess has very correctly mentioned, in the gaming community there is this atmosphere of misogyny and homophobia, and it's it's because people can hide behind a computer screen and say whatever the hell they want. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable anywhere. But this episode is love in its purest form, and I think we need to celebrate that, and that is absolutely fantastic.
And no matter what, it's going to trigger those people because they have the complete lack of emotional intelligence 100%. To understand it. Maybe one day they will, and maybe one day this episode, for a lot of those people, they might be saying something online that's homophobic, but who knows, maybe behind the scenes they've watched it and it has made them think and reconsider their views. And these type of things have the chance to do that, and I think it probably, in a positive note as well, that it may have had an impact on people who may have had those type of views and have felt such an emotional response to the episode. Maybe they are reviewing their own opinions as well, and hopefully that's a step forward as well.
Also, it may have people who are struggling with their own sexuality. I might see this episode and go, actually, no, it's okay, because this is right. This feels right.
It's as simple
it might be able to allow people to go, what I'm feeling is absolutely fine and absolutely right.
Representation matters, and
absolutely.
That's as simple as
absolutely.
that. I've just got a question for you. So, how do you think, without giving us, too many spoilers away, because there may be people who haven't played the game, considering how incredibly emotional episode 3 was, knowing what's coming both in the rest of The Last of Us and into The Last of Us 2, although we know there may be deviations and adaptations to the storyline, I'm pretty sure the main storyline is going to run similar to the game. How do you think you're going to cope with what's coming up?
Well, I don't think I'm ready for it. I don't think there's a lot of fans who are ready for it. And that's not just, as you say, it's not just what's in the future. It's what's in the near future as well. For anyone who hasn't played the game, I don't want to spoil it, but when the game came out, there was a DLC mission that came out afterwards, which is full of emotion as well. And I know for a fact that they're touching on that in the episode, in the series as well, and that is very emotional. But what Jess is referencing to is, I don't want to spoil anything, but yes, that is way down in the future, and we know it's coming up. And for those who've never played the game, you are not prepared. If you get emotional at episode 3 and episode 1 with the death of Sarah, I'm just going to leave it at that. You are not prepared. So, yeah. Just enjoy the episodes and the show for what it is. And
feel the emotion and sit with the emotion, because ultimately the aim, the feeling that the people involved in The Last of Us want you to feel at the end is love. So
exactly. And one thing I kind of want to highlight on, and The Last of Us 2 was voted the greatest game ever made. And
at that point, there may be the other games that have made since.
Yes, yeah. But
although I do agree with that.
I think it still holds the crown as the best game ever made, for mechanically, for graphically, for all that. And this episode has actually been dubbed the best episode ever made of TV. Now, I'm probably inclined to agree with that. I mean, one of my favourite episodes ever of TV is the first episode of season 7 of The Walking Dead, where you first kind of see Negan. That's one of my favourite episodes of TV. But this one, for me, has topped it. Well, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've watched this wonderful film and TV out there, and I'm sure there'll be wonderful film and TV to come and episodes. I just think it was this show and this particular episode has just shown, I think, like I said at the very beginning, how excellent storytelling, writing, acting, and an idea can be so gripping and emotional, and I think it's all about creating characters that you care about, that you want to see what happens to them, and sometimes that's difficult to do, and sometimes that can get lost in a lot of things eventually. I think they've just got such a great group of people together to do this, obviously wonderfully talented people, and also it's sticking with the theme. It's sticking with the theme of love. It's sticking with the theme of loss. It's a beautifully created infected world, even though it's brutal and scary and horrific in places.
But so is the real world at times.
Let's
be honest.
I think it's just sometimes everything comes together. And it's not just the acting, or it's not just the writing, it's everything. It's the look, it's the pace, it's the attention to detail, it's the cinematography. It's when things like that just all come together into this kind of perfect show. And I think that's what they've got with it. They've just been able to create something pretty incredible, I think. And hopefully will continue to prove to be that.
I totally agree. And I think that would be a perfect time to end this interview, guys. Jess, thank you very much for joining me in this episode. You'll be more than welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
To the Eerie Nerd Podcast. And guys, if you liked this episode of the Eerie Nerd Podcast, and you also liked the episode of The Last of Us, please let me know in the comments down below your thoughts. Needless to say, as we have kind of suggested, I will not accept any negative comments towards the community or towards anything like that. They will be removed and you will be blocked from the channel. But other than that, guys, I really hope you enjoyed it. Any final words?
Bye for now.
If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to consider subscribing to the channel. And did you know that I've got a Patreon? For £3 a month, you can support Eerie Earth, my paranormal podcast, and Eerie Nerd Gaming. And you will get a shout out in every single episode of Eerie Earth and every live stream. So head over to patreon.com/Eerie Earth for more information. Also head over to EerieEarth.com for more information on my paranormal podcast and more on this channel. Thanks again for listening, guys, and join me next time on the Eerie Nerd Podcast. Bye-bye for now.